Chapter 1. Blessed and Plagued in Dreams. As far back as the age of 5, I can remember being fascinated by my dreams. My dreams must have been more intense than other members of my family, for it seemed that no one even came close to talking about them as much as I did. I was the youngest of 5 siblings. My 2 sisters were the oldest, followed by my 2 older brothers, then myself. I was raised in an upper-middle-class home of the 60s. Upon waking in the morning, the first thing on my mind was the dreams I had had that night. My father already gone to work, and my older brother and sisters already moved out. Left my mother and my closest brother Craig left in the house to bear the constant onslaught of dream reports from me. I couldn't help it. It was so amazing to me. I had such incredible experiences during the night that I could not contain myself by morning. I had to tell someone about the amazing things that had happened to me. My mother and brother were so patient with me. Both of them never stifled me. They would listen, as if interested, to the small voice chattering away at them every morning. I am so grateful to these 2 wonderful souls. Not only did they listen to me, but also they were accepting, loving, and I always felt completely comfortable around them. My mother and my brother Craig are among the few at the top of my list of the most caring, accepting, and loving people in my life. I can't imagine how my early life would have been without these 2 individuals. Thank you, Mom and Craig. Throughout my childhood, I was blessed and plagued by intense real dreams. I say blessed and plagued because they could range from the ecstasy of flying and erotic sex to the horror of midnight spirit visitors. I remember waking, I will explain the quotes waking later in this chapter, one night to find my bedroom door opening by itself. Spirits would visit me, taunt me, and in many cases hold me paralyzed while I hovered prostrate a few feet above my bed. On other much more pleasant occasions, I would fly around over my hometown of Salt Lake City, Utah, or fly back for a visit to the town we had previously lived, Provo, Utah. These flights were breathtaking, real, and accurate. I remember waking and feeling so exhilarated. At the very young age of 5, I can remember how puzzled I was about how real these flights were. I had never flown before, yet somehow I knew that what I was experiencing was accurate. My flights were not fake or lacking in sensation. They were real. As the years passed, my experiences continued. By the age of 16, I was convinced that somehow I was drawing the attention of spirits. I continued to have numerous nighttime visitors. I was apprehensive about sleeping alone most of the time. I had left home at an early age, 15, so unfortunately most of my nights were spent completely alone in my studio apartment. I would pray every night for God to protect me from these spirits. Some nights I would get visited, other nights I would know I was dreaming, and launch into incredible flights. By this time, I had come to some conclusions about myself. Clearly, neither my friends nor family had experienced anything near the level of intense dreaming that I had. Imagine the little 5-year-old, now 16, sitting around smoking a joint with his friends, hey, it was the 70s, still chattering away about the dreams he had the night before. And surprisingly, for the most part, my friends were interested in what I was reporting to them. Or maybe they were just stoned. At the age of 19, my experiences took a psychic turn. I dreamed I was in a hospital. I was standing outside of one of the patient rooms. I was only there for a few seconds when my grandmother came out of the room. She told me that she had died and went on to tell me something of importance. Unfortunately, upon awaking, I could not recall a single word of her important message to me. But as I woke, I immediately said to my girlfriend, "I think Nana is dead." Later that day, I got a call from my brother who told me that my grandmother had died that night. When I talked to my father, who was in the hospital at the time she died, I described to him what the hallway looked like where I was standing in my dream. The way the walls had light green tile halfway up, and where the room was located in relation to other hallways and rooms. Incredibly, every detail I described to my father was accurate. I had had a real psychic premonition dream. My girlfriend had heard me declare the death of my grandmother before we even knew she was in the hospital, and my father confirmed the accuracy of my detailed description of an interior of a hospital I had never been to. It was at this same time that I began to experience even more intense dreaming phenomenon. I began to recognize the feel of the environment when I was dreaming. I began to consciously do things that were not possible in the waking world. Things appeared so real that I began to think I was leaving my body, astral projection. I had several experiences where I would find myself in my bedroom struggling to get back into my body. I will explain this later, but I want to make it clear right now that I realized years later that I was not out of my body. At the time, I did not know this. I write about them here because, as you will see later in this book, they are vitally important. These were quite terrifying experiences. I would hear loud suction noises, followed by a loud whooshing bang sound. I would experience a sensation of tingling and buzzing shoot through my body. During some episodes, I would have short periods of complete paralysis. This would happen while I was lying in bed after a brief awakening, usually in the early morning hours. But sometimes I would experience them at the beginning of the night as well. I would be lying there, and just as I would start to fall back asleep, just at that moment of transition between sleeping and waking, I would hear this swoom sound. The whole room would shake like a sonic boom, and vibrations would shoot through my body. I began to recognize this as a signal that I had crossed into whatever state it was. I actually liked the feeling. It was so magical and unworldly. Yet at the same time, I would be frightened because I knew that it meant unexpected things could happen at any moment. Sometimes I would be in a state of paralysis, either laying on my bed or floating several feet above it in a horizontal position, laying down in the air. The only thing I could move was my eyes. I could at times manage, with great struggle, to move my head and my right arm ever so slightly. Sometimes I would hear voices mumbling in the distance, or see people walk into my room. Many times they would taunt and laugh at my struggle to free myself from the paralysis that gripped me. Other times I would manage to crawl out of bed, and I do mean crawl. I could barely control my body as I would slide off the bed, fumbling on all fours around the room. It felt as if I was heavily drugged. There was no way I could stand. It was all I could do to fall, crawl, and flail around the room in my drugged, helpless state. Probably the most dramatic example of this was during a time that I was in London visiting my English relatives. Upon awakening one morning, I heard that familiar sound into the room as the vibrations rushed through my body. As I fought the paralysis, I started to crawl and flail around the room. Again, I felt totally drugged and struggled to maintain consciousness. While crawling on the floor, I suddenly shot across the room and up on the side of the wall. Plastered against the wall, I continued to struggle with my inability to control my body. I was no longer just flailing around on the floor. Now I was being shot around the room from ceiling to wall to floor. Much of the time, I would be shot up to a corner of the room, where two walls meet the ceiling. There I would be dragged across the wall, or eventually slide down back to the floor. It was quite terrifying. It's quite easy to see why someone might think they were out of their body, or even being harassed by some evil force. But as you will soon learn in this book, these experiences do indeed have a reason, and they are not of an evil nature. Once you understand what is happening, they herald opportunity, a magic door. It's interesting to note here that after all my years of research in this subject, I have never, until recently, heard of anyone that has had this same experience. Many have experienced the paralysis, the noise, and the drugged feeling, which I will explain later. But this was the first time I had someone mirror my exact experience. Now, some 20 years later, I was quite aware of what was really going on. I was on a first date with a woman I had met at the grocery store. After dinner, we returned to my place for a few glasses of wine. During our conversation, she began to tell me about her religious beliefs and how she knew there was an adversary. She began to recount for me an experience where she had been thrown around the room, stuck up in the corner of the ceiling, sliding down the wall and crawling around the room, trying to get back into her body, all while flailing around in some kind of drugged state. In every detail, her experience was the same as the one I had in London many years ago. She told me this story with terror in her eyes. You could sense that she was even afraid to tell me the story, as if she felt that just talking about it would bring evil to her. You know, that speak of the devil thing. She slept with the light on at night and prayed every night for protection from evil. I looked at her with a smile and said, "It sure is good that you told me about this. I'm going to change your life tonight. I'm going to take all that fear away from you. I know exactly what is happening to you, and you have nothing to fear. In fact, if you do as I tell you, you will discover the most amazing thing in your life is opening to you." Unfortunately, after explaining things to her, she apparently did not want to believe me. She seemed more comfortable with religion and evil spirits than the possibility that she possessed the incredible ability to enter higher states of consciousness. A tremendous door was opening to her, and all she had to do was understand what it really was. If she had followed my simple suggestion, new experiences would have opened up to her, her fear would have been gone, and the truth would have been self-evident. But she soon left my house, obviously in a hurry to get home, turn on the lights, pray, and get away from this strange man who spoke of freedom and spiritual co-creation. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me get back to the subject at hand. The noise visitors and panoramic flights continued on and off for the next 15 years till 1993. One evening, I was watching a favorite TV show of mine. The program regularly presented various futuristic sciences and emerging technologies. I loved this show and watched it whenever I had the chance. I turned to the program just as they were describing specific dream experiences. I was riveted to the television as they described example after example of the same experiences I had had all my life. My mouth dropped open and I said aloud, "That's it. That's what has been happening to me." At last, someone else knew what I had been experiencing, and there was even a name for it: lucid dreaming. Being aware that you are dreaming while you are dreaming. Now I was aware. And as I will explain in more detail later in this book, awareness is everything. Now that I understood the concept of dreaming aware, I began to test, explore, and interact with the dream environment. Ultimately, this would lead me on a search through a spiritual dimension, a search through reality, fear, joy, the universal source, and our relationship with it.